afternoon. You're in for a lot of excitement this afternoon. I have an announcement and I have an introduction that I'd like to make. First, the announcement is that in spite of the fact that this is a cross-platform event and I suggested that more platforms are better, we would like to invite you to choose one platform for your internet application, either your telephone or your computer, because we have so many people here that people are having a little hard time logging on. So if you could, as you sign on to the internet, to the Wi-Fi, choose one or the other, or sign off of one if you're on the other one. We want you to have access to Wi-Fi. We want everyone to have access to Wi-Fi. So that's my announcement. And now it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce David Poltrack, who's my board chair. He's been my board chair for the last couple of years. And I just start by saying it's just been such an honor. The best part of this job has been being able to spend at least an hour a week on the phone talking about all the exciting endeavors and projects and conferences and initiatives and industry initiatives that we have going on, and learning about the world from David's eyes. You can only imagine what that's like, especially as I share with you his impressive career. He's the Chief Research Officer at CBS Corporation. He's been there for a number of years, and he I got the chance to interview him last year at CES, and I said, what's the key to your success? And he said, well, you'd have to be right. And I can promise you, this man is right, and he's right on, especially with the things that he chooses to share with the audiences. He's selfless, he's tireless, and he brings discipline and really raises the bar for the industry. He has won so many accolades. He's a member of the Market Research Hall of Fame. He's a member of the Broadcast and Cable Hall of Fame, recently inducted in that, I think maybe 2 years ago. He's an adjunct professor at NYU and Columbia. He's the author of a book on television marketing, and as well, he was last year's Irwin Efron Award winner. Of course, we're going to have that award presented later on this afternoon. David also holds a BA in History, magna cum laude from Notre Dame University, and an MBA in Marketing from NYU. And David has brought to this conference, after his CPA measurement work that he brought to us a couple years ago, this year he's unpacked it, and he basically has brought forward some amazing neuroscience work. What I really want to, though, emphasize is the collaborative nature of the work with advertisers, with research organizations, with networks. This is the ARF at its finest. This is our vision, is to collaborate across all the different constituents of the ARF, and David has been a thought leader and an advocate of that. And most of all, and most importantly of all, he's a friend. So join me in welcoming David to the stage, please.
Okay, and as part of our Mutual Admiration Society, how about a great round of applause for Gail for another great conference? Okay, they're trusting me with a lot of technology up here, so we may be in trouble. Let's get this out of the way. Okay. This morning we shared the breakthrough results from our neuroscience research. We believe that the combination of effective creative pretesting and purchase-driven planning equals the formula for cross-platform success. This platinum session will be a discussion built around that theme. And that discussion has got to include you. At this morning's session, we employed the Pigeonhole Q&A system and encourage those in the audience to use the service to ask questions and vote on which of the questions posted by others they would like to see answered. Some of you took advantage of that opportunity, and we have a good base of questions for our discussion this afternoon. But please keep the questions coming and help us out by voting on the posted questions at Pigeonhole as this session progresses. Unfortunately, I'm going to counteract Gail's warning by telling you all to immediately get on the computer and use up all that internet time. But if you go on, you can see the website. A lot of people we've learned that we've already converted to a world where everybody assumes that everything is an app. This is not an app. It's a website. So go to the pigeonhole.at. Okay, so let's get started. On the targeting, media planning, and creative testing components of the CPA program can now be utilized as a sound basis for campaign development. We have already studied media dynamics and creative execution. Now we face the challenge of bringing all of this learning together to form a model for successful advertising. Let me start off by summarizing some of the key lessons that we have learned with all this research to date. I am sure that you're not going to be surprised to hear a representative of CBS cite these findings, and that you're still going to be skeptical about the findings after I cite them. But I'm here to be provocative. First, the long-term effects of advertising on average doubles the short-term effect of an ad, and in many cases significantly more than doubles the short-term effect. Second, we learned that consistent with established recency theory, advertising effectiveness is greatest within 48 hours of exposure. Therefore, purchase occasion-based media planning delivers superior ROAS. Third, we found that the shift from reach-based to efficiency-based television campaigns has resulted in advertising reaching significantly less target consumers on a weekly basis, which has in turn resulted in lower campaign ROAS and erosion of brand equity. Next, as currently deployed by national advertisers, the addition of digital advertising to existing television advertising campaigns only increases the overall campaign reach marginally. And finally, the combination of television and digital advertising delivers a superior ROAS. Therefore, the reduction of television advertising campaigns to fund digital campaigns is counterproductive. As the breakthrough ARF How Advertising Works study showed, it's all about cross-platform. It's more platforms, not stealing money from one for the other. Now, skepticism is healthy. Skepticism that leads to ignoring the results and not testing the validity of the findings is not healthy. Fortunately, many advertisers are now no longer letting their skepticism justify a standstill approach. First, we're seeing a movement back into advertising, which is important. Then we're seeing a movement back into television, particularly reach-generating television. This is obviously good news to my company and other television companies. It is also good news to those of us in the TV research front line. For the past few years, we've been forced to address and discredit the negative trend of reducing television quality and quantity. We now are going to be able to focus our research investments on validating and quantifying the benefits of the ROAS generated by increasing television advertising budgets and investments, and the more strategic building of a cross-platform campaign around a television advertising base. We look forward to being able to work with you on that productive goal. First, we will start with a little summary of our learnings from the two key people who actually did all the work. So Leslie will give a quick update on purchase-driven planning, and then Carl will follow with a summary of this morning's Neuroscience report.
So because he says quick, you have a card on your table, and there's a URL in here that downloads all the details. So feel free to go and get the full story, the full effects. So Dave came to me and he said, I want to be able to understand which campaign is going to get a higher ROI before it airs. Jumped in, and for Rethink, the outcome was a new planning paradigm, purchase-driven planning. We shared that in March. For audience measurement, we've extended this to radio. So we're taking this paradigm and sharing some insights with radio. So I'm going to do a quick sort of description of what the paradigm is and what the idea is, and give you a small set of results. But please feel free, the download has the full rich picture. So we believe this is going to rock your world. It's going to change how you think about media planning, advertising, and ROI. So purchase-driven planning is a better way to plan and compare alternatives before they run. It's a new way to understand your ROI. What drives the ROI? It can isolate the effect of the creative from the media. So the creative delivery from the media delivery, how is each part of your ROI? Critically important. So what does it do? It puts incremental sales at the center of your goals. So we've actually now understand that there are two ways to think about this. One is to look before you actually air, in the planning phase. You can question, what happens if I change my creative strategy? Which buyer segment drives the biggest sales? Do I get a higher payout if I have more reach? How much more reach? What is it worth? And how should I flight my impressions? You can use the part of the toolbox that you use is the pre-buy alternative estimates that you can do. Very simple math. It's in the paper. But on the post-buy side, what you get is a deeper understanding and some diagnostics. So instead of that black box, here's your ROI. You actually get to dig in and say, was it good creative? Could I have done a better job with different media? Like what actually worked and what didn't work? Let me dig in and figure out where against which targets. So this part of the toolbox is where we go back and look at what part was creative and what was your media tactic. So we've taken this into radio. So the example I'm going to share is a radio campaign. This was Brand B, I think it was breakfast product. So this measure is coverage of purchase occasions. So it's what % of purchase occasions were exposed to the ad. It's like reach, but of purchase occasions. Instead of households, it's purchase occasions. And you can see how each of the different segments did and what they did overall. For the media side, for looking at the creative side, we look at what was the dollars driven per exposed category purchase. So somebody goes to the store to buy the brand or buy the category. Were they exposed to advertising? What's the incremental sales per visit? It's very, very finely tuned to the visit. And here you can see radio did an amazing job. The very loyal buyers. Now this was a Mexican, this product has a Mexican flair. Radio's perfect. I mean, I didn't even know the ad, but I know the product. And I'm sure the music probably lent itself to it. The whole way it was talked about, radio would be the perfect venue for delivering really high incremental sales. Purchase-driven planning gives us the ability to multiply the pieces. So this is really spelled out in the paper. But you take weekly sales times weekly reach. That gives you your % coverage. You look at your incremental sales, and you can estimate the grand total ROI. So where are we going with this? We're currently working on cross-media. How does this work when you combine synergy, cross-media reach? There's a lot of pieces that we have to get in place for this. We're taking this beyond CPG. We'd like to be using NBI. And certainly, we've now taken it to radio. We need to get to print and mobile. Carl.
Thanks, Leslie. As you just heard a minute ago, part of purchase-driven planning is separating the media component. You know, what is the plan? Who are you targeting? How many people? And what is the timing? The other piece is the creative component. So what I'm about to show you is taking advantage of that ability that Nielsen Catalina Solutions data has and really honing in on the creative piece. For those of you who are here at the ARF, know that the ARF has had a long commitment to understanding the neurosciences and consumer neuroscience in general and in particular. It started in 2010 with Neurostandards 1.0. A couple years later, Neurostandards 2.0. And Neurostandards 1.0 was about asking academics to sort of challenge the suppliers about what they were saying about the tools and were they actually measuring what they said they were measuring. And then 2.0 said, okay, well, if we take these tools, do they add any value beyond self-report in terms of predicting sales? And while those were two great studies, when Leslie and I met a year ago with Dave in Television City, we said, what can we do to go beyond them? And how do we move the industry forward one more step? And what we realized was that with the ability to isolate the creative that Nielsen Catalina Solution has, we could actually do a study where we looked at the neuroscience tools independently and then in combination. And importantly, we took best-in-class approaches. And what do I mean by that? I mean, each one of the tools I'm going to describe very briefly have well over 2 decades of experience behind the metrics that we're pulling out of them. And we know from other studies that they correlate with behaviors you care about. But what had never been done is to combine them all into one study across multiple advertisers. So we had over 900 participants, 60 television ads across nearly 20 categories. And it was all CPG, but it was broad CPG. So we had adult beverages, we had soda, we had confectionery, we had baby products, and we had health and beauty. So a really broad range of creative. And as Leslie described, the beauty of the NCS data is you can get down to 2 households. One is exposed to the ad, one isn't. You then follow them into stores, and you look at the lift in sales to the one that was exposed versus the one that wasn't. And what we see in this data set and other data sets is the same advertiser, the same brand, different creative can have hugely different outcomes in market. And understanding that is critically important. So our goals were to try to correlate and understand how the different neuroscience measures, which I'll describe in a moment, correlate to in-market sales, which of the tools are better or performing over and above the others. And then I think really important, because this is a question that I get almost every day, is why combine all these? Aren't they all measuring the brain at some level? Do you really need different ones? And I think that's really exciting. And then finally, can we use these tools to do a better job of making advertising? And I want to spend one moment on that. In Neurostandards 1.0, going back to 2010, the conclusion was, you know what these neuroscience measures are really good at? Measuring second by second, moment by moment, passively an audience's response to the creative. But if it doesn't connect to something you care about, in-market sales, how are you going to believe those measures? And that's partly what we sought to do. So we had EEG, full head array, medical grade, 32 sensors measuring brainwave activity as participants who were selected because they are category buyers. 3 dimensions come out of that: attentional processing, emotional motivation, approach avoid, and memory activation. We then added biometrics. Think of that as a measure of the emotional journey or energy. And then facial coding. Is this something I like or dislike? And because we're about to have a representative from the chocolate industry, Hershey's up here, I'll give you an example of the difference between motivation and liking. There could be a plate of chocolate here. I like chocolate, but I'm on a diet, so I'm motivated to move away. So they don't always correlate, and you have to get both of those dimensions. We also collected eye tracking, which we use as a diagnostic measure. Put that aside for now. And we also collected self-report. I'm not going to talk about those results. I'm going to tease you. Come to Las Vegas at the end of June. You can hear about how self-report stacked up to in-market sales. Okay, so what did we find? To some degree, all of the tools predict sales. For those of you who are statistical geeks, you'll like this slide. For those of you who aren't, bear with me. What you're looking at is a plot of the predicted versus the actual sales for facial coding. And we did multiple models. And what you can see is that we had a range of the variance predicted, from a low of 9% to a high of 12%. This is just looking at facial coding alone. When you add biometrics, you see that it goes up. And now we have a range of between 22 and 29%. This is just biometrics alone, looking at the sales outcome. And then finally, when you add EEG, you see the range going even higher, from 47 to 62%. And in the end, what really mattered, as I said, is what happens when you combine them. So if you look at facial coding across different models, you look at biometrics across different models, EEG across different models, very consistent findings. When you combine them, you get even higher. And if you cherry pick the best model, you get a whole lot of variance explained. 77% of the pie is captured by the combination of metrics. And our job now is to go forward with this data set and dig a little deeper and learn more and more about each component of that creative so that we can help lift all boats. So quickly in summary, I think one of the big impacts here is understanding creative development at a deeper level and using tools that no one has a monopoly on the truth, but combined can give you deeper insights. And then also looking to see the ability to pinpoint second by second what's happening in the ad and make recommendations that you have confidence in because you know ultimately they'll lead to a better outcome in market. So with that, I will stop and turn things back over to Dave.
Okay, now it's time for you to participate. So first thing I'd like to do is introduce Charlie Chappell, who's the head of Global Integrated Media at Hershey's, who's going to join us on our panel. And just in case you don't know it, Charlie is the only important person up here. He is a client. He actually advertises. And so pay most attention to Charlie. Before I get to the pigeonhole results, in fact, I'd like to just give Charlie his 2 cents. So what do you think of all this so far, Charlie?
Well, I kind of like being a client because I don't have to wear a tie, first off. No, I think, especially as a marketer in an industry where we don't control the retail channel where we sell, the addition of the purchase-based data and linking it to whether it's the media or the neuroscience is just a massive breakthrough for us because we used to have to rely on such soft metrics to understand if our media or our creative was really working to drive sales. Now there's almost no excuse. If you're not using that and you're still relying on those soft metrics, you're kind of leaving something to be desired. So, and that becomes critically important, especially in this cross-platform world. I think the biggest thing that we're dealing with is how do I plan my media across all of those? And understanding how one is working versus the other is one of the most challenging things that we deal with. One of the things we get the most questions about today in general. So the breakthroughs that you're starting to see here are absolutely critical because even as I go to those different platforms, we know really well from years and years of what makes great creative in sort of that passive TV viewing environment. But now as I go to all these other platforms, some of those things remain the same, but not all of them. And how do we start to master that so that as we're developing our creative and matching it with the media, we're having the greatest impact that we can have?
Thank you. Okay, now on to your questions. So let's start with the one that so far has the most votes. How do you know you've separated creative from media?
Sounds like a client asking that question.
So actually, it's the neuro work is one of the key answers. I mean, so when we found this measure, when we moved from incremental sales per household to incremental sales per purchase occasion, we could see these patterns across these different households, and we said, wow, this is beginning to tell us something about the creative. But now with neuro coming in and being able to find an R-squared of 77 to those same commercials, it validates that actually what we are measuring is something about the commercial. So, we didn't realize we were going to get the benefit back. We thought it was only going to be one way, that we were going to be supporting, understanding the whole client's journey through the understanding. But in fact, I think that's one of the things we've been able to understand is that, and it's probably creative within context.
Yeah.
It's not creative all by itself. It's probably in the context. I would guess that we know that a commercial, if you're a Insurance, car insurance, you're going to do way better right after a car accident in a movie or something. You know, like those kind of things are going to make a commercial work more strongly. So the context is in there. It's part of what we're measuring, but it's definitely the response consumers having to the advertising.
Yeah, I would just add that one of the powers of the study was that it was in context, right? We did it prospectively. We didn't choose 60 ads that we knew the outcome of and then test them. We actually, in flight, picked ads hoping that we would get enough variance on the other side, and we did, and it was just last year. So it was in the context of all these screens and all the distractions everyone has in their lives.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so we'll go to this one. Do the results of this neuroscience research suggest a formula for making successful advertising? Now, before you answer this question, if the answer is yes, I want a proprietary answer.
Yes.
Do not share it with all these people. There's money to be made.
Well, I hate to disappoint you, Dave, but the answer is no. You know, what we see every day is that there really are many roads to success. And I think, you know, when you talk to people like our keynote this morning and folks in the agency, there's just an unbelievable ability for creative people and creative ideas to be expansive. And now we're taking these tools which have an incredible reductive power and we're trying to put them together. Mm-hmm. And that can lead to fireworks at times. But I think that what we see over and over again is that stories well told that have a clear beginning, middle, and end with relatable characters that are aspirational or transformative, that integrates the brand, product, or service and has some kind of emotional payoff is really key. And I think one other point, which is if you look over the last 10 years, which happens to correlate with the 10 years I've been in this industry, I think there really has been some shifts from sort of authority marketing to authentic marketing, and a shift away from purely rational to more emotional, and a shift away from persuading to engaging. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you have measures that are really getting as close to consumers as you can, those are the kinds of things that resonate because people want to be heard.
I think you've also seen a shift away from I've got one ad and it's got to work for the next 6, 9, 12 months, and if it doesn't work, I'm toast for the rest of the year. And so it's almost like understanding what works or a formula is fine, but now you're at the point where you're making so much that if it doesn't work, you should be able to take it down. Now, there's a challenge in that in developing an efficient model to produce that much content. I think that's what a lot of marketers are working on. But this starts to say, well, I can use this to see what is working and what isn't. But you know, it's not like I got to hit a home run with the 30-second
and learn
ad.
For future campaigns.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, it encourages creativity and encourages more different creative versions of, and I think that is very good for all the people on the creative side. They don't believe it, I'm sure, but. Okay, let's move on here. That one's answered. This one up. You mentioned that you've looked at hundreds of campaigns in the development of your media planning tools. What are some key surprises that have come out of that work? I think I'm the one that said we've looked at hundreds of campaigns.
We have.
So let me talk about some key surprises. One of the true key surprises that is that when you actually buy into the concept of frequency, of recency, and you buy into the concept that the advertising is most effective within 48 hours of a purchase occasion, and you look at the distribution of purchase occasions across the week and on a regular basis, you realize really only a limited amount of people, even in the most effective campaign, are exposed ideally before they enter that store or make that purchase. So there is a lot of work still to be done. I think a lot of advertisers think that they spend too much money on advertising, that they've reached the point of diminishing returns. Yet when you really get down to that small time window and the critical, when advertising is most effective, most of the people walking into that store have not seen an ad in the last 48 hours. And the second thing that came out of it for me is how similar all the campaigns are in the categories. There is an approach, a lot of CPG advertising campaigns are very similar in execution. So to the extent that they leave something on the table, they're all leaving it on the table. And there's a fairly large percentage of the people in the country that are not exposed to advertising, not because it is impossible, but because we've developed legacy systems that don't tap into them. So any other comments on that?
I think this gets back to the point of wishing for a formula and following the formula. Is probably why I've seen that in all the different categories I've worked in. All the creative, all the media plans tend to look the same. And this is one of the things that that we've been trying to challenge internally with some of our brands is how do you break through, because it's been getting even harder to do that in general. So it starts there. So I think you're right. For us, what's been surprising for us as we started to apply this is you really get insights about who your target really should be. And we've had some brands who have actually changed their strategy by taking this approach because the data speaks for itself.
Yeah. I would say two things. One is it's shocking. So we're used to talking about reach, but we all talk about reach differently.
Yeah.
Different media talks about reach differently. They have different time frames. Often it's a campaign. Sometimes it's a week. Like they're not all on the same level playing field. When you say which purchase occasions were exposed, and I don't care if you use 48 hours or a week or a month, it's shocking how little reach there really is of those purchase occasions. Yes, 48 hours is great. A week would be good. 4 weeks is, mandatory. If you haven't delivered your message, you're really not doing anything. And there's nothing happening. And it's shockingly apparent how few purchase occasions are influenced by advertising. So that's one. And then on the other side, it's also surprising to see the percent of ads that have almost no response across the board. They'll have one little cell that has more than pennies. So it's a penny everywhere and maybe 10 cents. Where we saw, radio, $2.93 in a cell. I mean, you can really, advertising can do wonders, but it can also do nothing. And why waste your money if you've got nothing? Like, why not invest in having good creative?
You're using dollars per purchase occasion as your dependent variable. Are you controlling for the price of the brand?
It depends on which place you're looking and how. In our media planning, purchase-driven planning, yes, the price of the brand is definitely included in our work in doing measurement. But in addition, when we went to the part on neuro, what we also saw was that brands that were more expensive had higher lift. So brands with more coverage of purchase occasions, brands with larger brands, more substantial brands. We'll be talking about that tomorrow in a session on normative data. But we saw that marquee brands, large brands, actually have higher lift for the same investment. So the size of your brand and the amount of money per unit can influence the ROI. So we actually controlled for that in the neuro piece. It was one of the insights that came out of the neuro pieces. Somebody planted that. I know, somebody planted that. That was.
Most of the work that you've presented to date has been in CPG categories. Have you done any work that does not involve CPG?
Most of the work that we do, all the work we do at Catalina, Nielsen Catalina, well, not all. So we do also retail studies, but most of the work is CPG. That's our purview, is CPG. Nielsen does do work on NBI, and so that's credit card data. And there are other venues where that's done.
Yeah, and I would just add, while it would be nice to have this kind of study across all categories, it's a little harder to do, for example, with automotive. But certainly our client base, which originally was mostly and predominantly CPG, is growing beyond that to include automotive, financial services, the entertainment industry, and technology. So I think, emotions are everywhere. And I, with all due respect to the chocolate category, people can get excited about cars, and what's more exciting than money, right? I mean, financial services is not rational, right? There's nothing rational about it. Just look at our economy. So I really think that people have to understand that emotions are a process that are always on and cut across every category, and that's something that we have seen over and over and over again with these measures.
I would just add that we have done some very interesting work in the area of quick service restaurants, and we're just putting the finishing touches on a major study of all of the retail advertising activity in the fourth quarter of last year going into the Christmas season that I think will be very enlightening, and we hope to have that for you at our next conference. We are out of time. We are not out of questions, though. So the panelists will get all the questions, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can on Pigeonhole, and also in conversations with you tonight and for the remainder of the conference. And thank you very much for your attention, and on with the conference.